The Russians are taking heavy losses mainly due to the weather, even before considering Ukrainian weapons. We'll discuss this in detail, along with other events on the front and afterward in this Ukraine war situation report. Holy Straw says, save the most at Holy Now with my code. The Ukrainian power grid is under so much pressure that it is now experiencing outages even without specific attacks by the Russians. 2 days ago, the 400 kilowatt line to Romania and Moldova and the 750 kilowatt line between western Ukraine and central Ukraine went down. Ukrainians say this wasn't a Russian attack or cyber attack, but just a system overload due to pressure on their power supply from Russia. However, attacks continue. There was an attack on a maternity hospital in Zaporizhzhia, which resulted in numerous injuries. And on the Russian side, several Shahed drones were used on a bus carrying miners in Dnipro. At least 12 people were killed. At the same time, satellite images have revealed that the Russians have set up additional Shahed launch pads near Ukraine, and numerous Iskander-Tels, which are launch vehicles for the Iskander-M ballistic missiles, as well as for the Iskander-K cruise missiles, have appeared around Ukraine. That means an intensification of the shelling is to be expected. We move on to developments along the front, and that's where we'll start. In the Wufchansk region, since we have no news from Sumy and can't document any changes. In Wufchansk, a Russian mill blogger says that 2 soldiers are in Selene, but they have no chance of reaching them at all. The losses in the region are so severe. Drivers, cooks, and airfield personnel are being sent to the infantry because the Russian side keeps attacking. We're talking about this village here. 2 Russian soldiers broke through there, but they can't be reached. Here again, there are heavy losses on the Russian side, who are maintaining the pressure in this way. In addition, there is a geolocation here from the region east of Wufchansk. There was a Russian infiltrator there, so a Russian infiltration took place in Nesterna, which has been geolocated there. The Ukrainians defeated him there, so Russian activity continues in this region. In this case, however, we can confirm that the Ukrainians were on the ground there and quite obviously repelled this attack, so that at least no one carries out any infiltration among them. If you're put off, today's sponsor can help. When researching for videos, I often have to access websites that block parts of the world by their IP, or let's say, are a bit questionable. That's where I absolutely need a VPN. With CyberGhost VPN, today's sponsor, I can access these websites securely without logs and bypass geo-blocks on 40 streaming services. With only 2 clicks, you can choose from 100 countries CyberGhost offers to access sites blocked in your area. CyberGhost. Can I access the best documentaries ever? Namely those from the British Broadcasting Corporation with CyberGhost? Of course, no logs are kept, so no one can track which sites you have visited. With CyberGhost, all your online activity is fully encrypted, giving you complete internet privacy. With a subscription, I can connect 7 devices, like smart TVs and phones, and share it with friends and family. The software is user-friendly and requires no technical setup. Support is available 24/7, including in German if any issues arise. Thousands of 5-star Trustpilot reviews and over 38 million users speak for themselves. Use the link in the description for an 83% discount and 4 free months. There's also a 45-day money-back guarantee. We continue with the other developments along the front, and there have been just as few changes to report in the Velika Burlak region as in Kobyansk, Borowa, and Liman. Only in the direction of Sloviansk are there changes again. And there we can see, for one thing, that the Ukrainians are in positions in Riznikivka where they haven't been seen before. That was the wrong one. It was here. So there were likely successful Ukrainian counterattacks here. Or they held out further east than previously expected and seen. In addition, the Russians have been spotted in Misnikivka-Minikivka. Here, at this spot, this is a position south of it, which according to the deep state map is already partly controlled by the Russians. We can see a Russian position now at this cross street. That means the Russians are still active in the village and may currently be expanding their control over the area. We continue towards Kostiantynivka, and Russians have been spotted east of the city of Kostiantynivka itself. We have geolocated it. Right here at this spot. This is roughly here on the map where a Russian soldier was seen. At the same time, however, footage was taken showing Ukrainians operating in the south of Kostiantynivka and attacking Russians there. That means we see that in the contested area here to the south, the Ukrainians are still operating and the Russians definitely have not consolidated their positions there. Additionally, the Ukrainians have continued to be geolocated in Yablunivka. Fighting has been going on there for a long time, and the area is marked as contested on the map. We now have new geolocation from northern Yablunivka and the area immediately east of it. That means we now know that the Ukrainians are definitely still active in this area here, just like here. So are they actually still holding positions there as well? Even though we've already seen the Russians south of Berostok, and I believe there was even a recent geolocation in Ilnivka. All of this, of course, is an indication of how the front is currently fragmented due to infiltration tactics and, at the same time, the dominance of drones. Then we have the deep state map, which is pro-Ukrainian, and now attributes this area to the Russians. So, according to the pro-Ukrainian deep state map, the area south of the reservoir here is now completely in Russian hands. The Ukrainians held out there for, 2 years. When the battle for Torres began, that must have been about 2 years ago. So that's definitely over now. All positions south of that are now firmly in Russian hands, especially since the pro-Ukrainian deep state map no longer attributes them to Ukrainians. That's all from the region. We're heading west, with no major updates from Dobropilyan or Pokrovsk. We have a few geolocations in this region, but all of them fall within the area that we clearly attribute to one side. So, I don't see any changes there. Mashova. From the direction of Mashova, we have here from the southern edge of Ivanivka. In the fall, the Ukrainians managed to drive the Russians out of the village again. A Russian soldier has now been spotted north of the river there, right at the southern edge of Ivanivka. That was probably just an infiltration. Of course, this will have to be monitored over time, but at least there was a Russian soldier there again. Further south, towards Pokrovska, we have a Russian position north of Dobropilyan. The village has also been contested for a long time, and now we have the Russians operating north of it, by the river, in this area, operating at the Haidchula. And there was also recent geolocation just west of the river. It seems that there are at least some soldiers near Dobropilyan who have already crossed the river, further south towards Huliapole. Here we have the Russians west of Preluki and northwest of Seline. Seline is here, and Preluki is here. We have geolocated this spot where the Russians were seen directly west of Preluki, and here, northwest of Selene. That should be about here, at this spot, and roughly there. So also here, as we can see. The infiltrations continue in that direction. The Russians are slowly pushing forward. Another sign of this would be this geolocation. There, a Russian flag raising is shown in the village of Sviatopetrivka. That was at least an indication of a captured town. So here already, or rather, village here. But again, a reminder. This has now become a common tactic from the Russian side, that individual soldiers break through, carrying a flag with them and showing it to the drones to imply that they have taken the village. The intention may be to unsettle Ukrainians, but it also lets them report soldiers as advancing. They claim success, even without any control on the ground. How ready for combat the soldiers involved in something like this actually are even a day later is another question, one that still hasn't been answered. At least we know Sviatopetrivka was infiltrated. There's no reason to consider the village under Russian control because of this. In the direction of Zaporizhia, we have Russians being captured, and quite far to the north, here in Novoyakovlivka, right at this point. We recently had a geolocation at that spot, which showed us that there were infiltrations up to the north there. In this case, the Ukrainian soldiers managed to capture the Russian soldiers. And being captured is probably the best possible outcome for soldiers who penetrate so deeply. Currently, many Russian soldiers are freezing to death if they survive drone attacks during infiltration attempts. So we have a Ukrainian colonel who reports on what the current situation is like, and the preparation, who of course points out that preparation is essential for survival in winter itself. The soldiers' ability to warm themselves is a basic requirement for soldiers to be able to fight at all in the long run. The Russian soldiers, on the other hand, only have what they can carry on their bodies. They cross the front on foot and want to stay mobile so they don't get killed by drones, because they are so heavily loaded that they can only walk slowly and have to take breaks all the time. So they have to carry their clothes with them, their weapon, ammunition, not just a minimal load, but enough to be able to fight longer battles. They have to carry drinking water with them, especially now that everything tends to freeze. Then they need to carry food with them, and on top of that, extra equipment against the cold. Sleeping bags and blankets are already bulky and therefore cumbersome, and all of that, of course, adds up. They don't have to stay put, but rather keep moving. And here we have a video of a Russian soldier from the perspective of a drone. And you see, he does have a backpack, but how much can actually fit in there? How much can fit in there to be used somewhere? He even brought a kerosene stove when he arrived. How does he get supplies? They can't be delivered by vehicle. That means everything that is delivered to him has to be delivered by drones, which at least have a shorter flight time due to the temperature. Because of the less efficient batteries, due to the cold, and with current drone surveillance, every delivery is also a danger for the soldier, as he could be detected. If you see a drone delivering something, just note where it lands, and you'll know the enemy soldier's location. Also, the thing that helps best against the cold, which is fire, is practically suicide. It attracts Ukrainian troops. Whether it's because of the smoke itself, which is visible if you don't have dry fuel, or of course because of the heat signature on thermal imaging devices. We know bomber drones and many first-person view drones now have thermal imaging. In that case, an open fire just signals the enemy. Here I am, please attack me. Please destroy me. In contrast, the Ukrainians are usually in prepared positions where they have equipment to hold out. And above all, the difference is that they stay in these positions. That means if they have a lot of equipment there, they don't have to carry it around with them. They don't have to go out into the open air. They don't have to. They don't break through the ice in a small stream and get a wet foot or something like that, because their shoe filled up with water. At minus 15 degrees, a soaked foot can quickly lead to deadly hypothermia. Even warm clothing won't protect you then, right? To help, you need to find shelter, dry your clothes, and warm your foot with fire. The Russians can't stop that. They have to advance many kilometers in no man's land without any protection except for what they have with them. Their best option is likely to find a basement and wait there. But basements protect from wind, not the cold. Fires remain visible there, raising the question, where is the fuel coming from? Smoke may be visible, or carbon monoxide poisoning can occur if an open fire is used in poorly ventilated rooms. Realistically, thousands of Russian soldiers are dying from hypothermia because they have no alternative. We had temperatures as low as minus 20 degrees, and that was without heavy equipment. And then we're talking about infiltrations by soldiers who cross the front and sometimes have no contact on the ground for weeks, only being supplied occasionally by drone drops. And what can realistically be achieved there? In the first winter of the war in 2022-23, there were various voices claiming that the Russians would lose 100,000 soldiers to freezing. But in reality, nothing like that happened. But now, the Ukrainian statements simply match the logic of what we are seeing. Because if we look at this picture here, how much equipment can he actually carry? Because as I said, when he advances, he must carry his weapon, enough ammunition, and realistically, a few hand grenades. He needs drinking water. He needs food. Then maybe some hygiene supplies. Maybe a change of clothes, especially if he gets wet. He has to be able to change his clothes. Everything must fit in his backpack, plus a sleeping bag and possibly a sleeping mat. It adds up to such an extent that surviving for weeks becomes extremely difficult. And there are videos showing, for example, Russians desperately trying to get drinking water. I can't and don't want to show you these videos here, but Russian soldiers are definitely suffering a terrible fate in significant numbers within Ukraine. Then we have news from the area of hybrid warfare. Now, every day, more balloons are being detected by the Poles, flying in from Belarus. At first, it was only flights to Lithuania, and those continue, but now more and more balloons are arriving in Poland as well. Sometimes there are dozens per day. There was also another hybrid warfare report from Germany, because there, 23 drones were flying over an Air Force base for hours, and they couldn't be intercepted, and the perpetrator couldn't be identified. We also have good news for Ukraine. Elon Musk and Starlink are working to block Russian use of Starlink in Ukraine. The Russians had started, as I reported here, to carry out attacks with attack drones that had Starlink. This enabled communication well behind the front lines, mostly unaffected by electronic warfare. This let the Russians target planes and helicopters well beyond normal safe zones, creating a major danger for Ukraine. But as we can see, there was a very quick response from the Americans, from Starlink's side, to prevent that. One of the first steps, as Reba reports here, was also to reduce the speed. There would be connection losses at 75 to 90 km/h. They write there that it's not a big deal, because you just have to reboot the system and then you'll have a connection again. Probably only for a short time again. That might be enough for a Shahed or something like that. But a Molnia, which is supposed to directly hunt targets on the ground, it will become much less efficient and a bigger problem there. Even rebooting is likely only a temporary fix, because we also have the report here that they are starting to set up a whitelist, where the Ukrainian side is taking action, and to register the Starlink terminals, so that in the near future, all terminals that are not on this whitelist will simply be shut down. And that probably means that from the Russian side, the only chance to use Starlink would be to capture Ukrainian systems. And of course, they could only use them as long as these systems remain on the whitelist, because all others would then be disconnected from the network. And that's it for now, at this point, as I said. Once again, a reminder, if you want to protect yourself on the internet, today's sponsor can of course help you with that as well. Once again, thank you to CyberGhost for supporting us with this ad. If you also want to surf the internet safely with a VPN, click the link in the description and get 83% off plus 4 months free. If you enjoyed it, please give a thumbs up to help the algorithm and comment if you'd like to add something. And if you're new here, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you don't miss future videos. That's all from my side for now. Thanks for your attention and see you soon. Thanks also to the supporters on Patreon as well as the members here on YouTube. In particular, I would like to thank the Lieutenant Colonels Mahamuri and Thomas K, as well as the Lieutenants Vision, Soundlab, Robert Fiel, Matt Burke-Mutter 1000 Beertainment, Janis Gu NTX, Sascha Müller-Cunningham, European Union Stress, Jans vom Eck, Uwe, Die Fremen, Nickname 2Bip, Carsten Schulz, Gulaschnascher 4000 and Tequila. 42, thank you very much. Without you, this wouldn't be possible.